we just did our Minds On activity, which was comparing these three items and what they have in common and what they might remind you of. So, with that being said, today we are learning how to make connections. So making connections really helps a reader understand what they're reading. They can understand how a character might be feeling in a moment of the book and the motivation behind their actions. It makes the reader more engaged in their reading experience, and they gain a deeper understanding of the text. So we are learning three different types of connections that we can make while reading: a text to text, text to self, and text to world. Text is text. This happens when a book reminds you of another book that you've read previously. The stories might have similar characters, problems, or themes. Text to text is when the story that you're reading reminds you of something that might have happened in your own life. It could be a character's feeling, a situation, or an experience that is similar to something that you have been through. And finally, text to world. So this happens when a story makes you think about something that's happening in the real life. It could be, or it could remind you of a news story, a big event, or something in the world around you. So, looking at this anchor chart here, I have the three categories of connections that we just learned about: text to text, text to self, and text to world. While you're reading, here are some question prompts that you can think about to help you make these types of connections. So, looking at text to text, have you read another story with a similar theme? What other stories have you read that have a similar problem or event? Does this remind you of any other characters from other books? And then text to self, how does this story remind you of something in your own life? How can you relate to the characters must be feeling? Is there a moment in the story that reminds you of something you've done or seen? And finally, text to world, can you think of a real world issue that connects to what is happening in the story? Does this remind you of an event from history? And how might the character's action impact the world or community around them? So this anchor chart will be always displayed in our classroom that you can refer to and make those connections while reading to make sure that you really understand what you're reading and can make those further connections. Alrighty, so today we are going to be doing a read aloud, and we're going to be reading Chester Way by Kevin Hinkins. While we're reading today, I'm going to be modeling some connections that I will make, and you're going to see what type of connection I'm going to be doing. So either text to text, text to self, or text to world. Okay, Chester's Way. Hello, my name is Chester, and I like crochet. I can't say that word, but that's okay. And making my bed. Chester had his own way of doing things. Chester's best friend Wilson was exactly the same way. Oh my goodness, I missed the page. Okay, let's start this again. Chester, he always cuts his sandwiches diagonally. He always got out of bed on the same side, and he never left the house without double knotting his shoes. Chester always had the same things for breakfast: toast with peanut butter and jam. And he always carried a miniature first aid kit in his back pocket just in case. You definitely have a mind of your own, said Chester's mother. That's one way to put it, said Chester's father's. So if I'm looking at this right now, this is connecting to something in my personal life. So does this story remind you of something in your own life? And to me, this reminds me of my morning routine. Every morning, I always make sure my bed is made. I always brush my teeth, floss my teeth. I have the same routine every day to make sure that I feel calm and ready to conquer the day. Chester's best friend Wilson was exactly the same way. That's why they were best friends. Chester wouldn't play baseball unless Wilson played, and they never swung at the first pitch or slid head first. Wilson wouldn't ride his bike unless Chester wanted to, and they always used hand signals. If Chester was hungry, Wilson was too, but they rarely ate between meals. Some days I can't tell those two apart, said Wilson's mother. Me neither, said Wilson's father. Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. They loved to go on picnics. Once, when Wilson accidentally swallowed a watermelon seed and cried because he was afraid that a watermelon plant would grow inside him, Chester swallowed one too. Don't worry, said Chester. Now, if you grow a watermelon plant, I'll grow one too. All right, so this part actually makes me remember another story that I read. So that would be a text to text because it reminds me of another book. So have you read another story with a similar theme? And to me, I remember reading a story called The Giving Tree. I'm not sure if many of you have read it, but it's about a friendship between this tree that likes to give and a little boy. And the friendship and the connection they made is very similar to Chester and Wilson's in this book. So that would be a text-to-text connection. Chester duplicated his Christmas list every year and gave a copy to Wilson because they always wanted the same things anyway. For Halloween, they always dressed as things that went together. Salt and pepper shakers, 2 mints on a string, ham and eggs. They really are 2 peas in a pod, said Chester's mother. Looks like it, said Chester's father. In spring, Chester and Wilson shared the same umbrella. In winter, they never threw snowballs at each other. In fall, they raked leaves together. And in summer, they reminded each other to wear sunscreen so they wouldn't burn. Okay, now, this kind of reminds me of my daily life in the real world, right? Like learning in the news about maybe how dangerous the sun rays are. So this would be a text to world, right? Can you think of a real world issue that connects to what's happening in the story? Chester and Wilson have to put sunscreen on because of the dangers of the sun rays, and similar to what's happening in the real world, we gotta be careful and be sun safe, right? So that would be a text to world. Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Chester, that's the way it was. And then Lily moved into the neighborhood. Okay, so I'm just gonna pause there for a second because now it's gonna be your turn. So I'm gonna give out sticky notes in a moment, but not yet. 3 sticky notes for each category. As I read, as I continue reading, you're gonna make either a text-to-text connection, a text-to-self connection, and a text-to-world connection. I have my 3 connections that I made and modeled in the book. So the giving tree as a text-to-text, my morning routine, text-to-self, and wearing sunscreen as a text-to-world. And also, if you prefer to not write, I also have a Google Padlet that you can use technology for, or you can just verbally discuss your ideas as well that we'll go through in a moment. But I'll give you time to do that now.